What's going on, traders? We got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the SPY, the triple Qs, and we're even going to talk about Palantir. Before we start, like, subscribe, comment your thoughts below. Let's get into the video. So right now we are looking at the NQ Nasdaq daily time frame. And what's important to note here is that we're having a very hard time breaking out this area where Jerome Powell originally sold off the market. We talk about this all the time. If we zoom in here, right? Right here is where Jerome Powell originally sold off the market at around 22,400. And currently, we're having a very hard time getting above not only 22,400, but 22,300. And so I do imagine that this is what the market is waiting on, or at least big tech is waiting on. And what I mean by that is when we're looking at Mag 7 or the Mag 7 in general, we're not seeing that momentum carry across the board. What I mean is that you got triple Qs. You got triple Qs making new highs. You got SPY making new highs. But when you look at, names like Nvidia, right? You're not really, Nvidia pumped, sure, but you're just not seeing anything else. You're not getting anything else from names like Nvidia. You're not getting anything from names like Tesla. You're not seeing anything from Microsoft, right? And so when we go back to the NQ, I do think that this is what the overall market is waiting on for us to break above this area here. If we break above 22,400, we'll just say 22,500 as our psych level, we can start seeing a squeeze all the way towards the top of this rising wedge at around 23,000. Same thing for ES. You look at the ES and you're looking at the same scenario, right? Right here, Jerome Powell originally sold off the market at around 6160, 6170, 6160. And so I do imagine if we break above 6170, we'll just say 6180 to be safe. You're going to squeeze towards the upside and you can start seeing a move towards 6300. It's also important to note that you are looking at an ascending triangle here or a possible ascending triangle. And the reason why we say possible is because it's not confirmed until you break the neckline. But it's also important to note that you are looking at a potential triple top here. You got your top here. And if you get somewhat of a bearish candle here, you could be looking at another triple top here. Now, again, it's not confirmed until you break the neckline towards the downside, but it is something to be cautious of. Now, me personally, I do think we're going to break towards the upside. That's just me. And the reason why I think that's going to happen is because I will pretty much be reneging on what I said before when I said if ES breaks above 6100, you're going to head towards 6200. So I still stand by that. I still think it's possible. And if we do break above this ascending triangle, if we're talking about the measure move is pretty insane, and I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, maybe towards the end of the year. But if you're talking about the measured move here, you're looking at a pretty crazy price target. Me, personally, I mean, 6600 is insane. It's pretty insane. So we're gonna lowball it and say 6300. If we break out of this ascending triangle. So this is something you definitely want to pay attention to. Watch for a break above 6180. You break above 6180, you're obviously looking at a move towards 6200. And then you want to see a break and retest of this ascending triangle. And then you can start heading towards that 6300, possibly 6400, if we're being greedy, if we're being optimistic. So that's what we're looking at for the ES. And so we look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is showing some signs of life. It's nothing too crazy yet, but again, still don't have anything for Bitcoin. You do have somewhat of an evening star pattern. If Bitcoin gets above 99K, then we just definitely start talking about moves towards the upside. But until that happens, just don't have much for it. It's still trading within this range between 92K and 99K. So pretty boring, but overall, 99K is what you want to watch out for. Then after that, obviously, you want to get past your psych level of 100K when it comes to Bitcoin. We look at the SPY. So SPY looks good here, right? But again, this is pretty annoying, and we talked about this in the Discord. It's really annoying just how we're making these small moves towards the upside. I mean, we had FOMC minutes today, and still really didn't get anything out of it. I mean, we saw a small pump towards the upside when it comes to the SPY and the triple Qs, but nothing to get overly excited about. And I'm seeing YouTubers, people on Twitter, Reddit, social media, they're all like all-time highs and they're getting happy and everything like that. But it's like, where's the correlation when you're looking at everything else? You're just not seeing it. So again, I think that the market is waiting for us to break out on the Nasdaq and the ES because despite the SPY making new highs and even the triple Qs making new highs, you're not seeing it from the NQ and the ES. And I think once that happens, that's when you're going to start seeing that correlation across the Mag 7 and other big names. And so when we go back to the SPY, again, we broke above this rising wedge pattern, which is a good sign. I would say a good sign short term, but long term, I do imagine that we're going to roll back into this rising wedge. And if we do, that's a bad sign. Okay, so you definitely want to see the SPY hold 608, 607. You get below 607, you're looking at a move towards 605 psych level. But ultimately, your key level here is 600. After that, 598. We talk about 598 all the time. You break below 598, chances are you're just heading towards this gap fill at 584. So that's what we're looking at for the SPY. If we're talking about downside, now if we're talking about upside, 616. Right, 616 seems to be the target, all-time high targets that we're heading towards. Once we hit 616, I do think we're going to see some turbulence from there, possibly a retest back towards the downside, and then we'll have to see what happens from there. If we're being greedy when it comes to the SPY, we can start talking about moves all the way towards 630. Not quite convinced that that's going to happen just yet, but if I am convinced, I will definitely let you guys know. Triple Qs, triple Qs. Same thing as in regards to the triple Qs. Once again, I don't. I think the Mag Seven and these other big names are just simply waiting on the triple Qs and the Nasdaq to break above those Jerome Powell levels, right? Because we saw the triple Qs, break above 540, but then almost immediately it gave it back. So it's really annoying. It's really frustrating because we're dealing with a scalper's market right now. I wouldn't even call this a day trader's market, really. You're getting like $1 a day off the triple Qs and the SPY. Maybe you get lucky, you get a little bit more, but other than that, you're just not getting much from the SPY and the triple Qs. Now you're making new highs, sure, but when you look across the market, where's the correlation? So that's pretty concerning for me. I would assume that's concerning for you, but you do what you want, you believe what you want. But at the end of the day, once again, if we break above 540 and actually hold on the triple Qs, we can start talking about moves towards 544, 545 psych level, and we can start heading as high as the 550s. But until that happens, we're just pretty much trading in this range. It's pretty annoying. We possibly could see a retest back towards 533 as long as we're trading within the supply and demand zone. So we can see a move like this. I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow or anything, but it's just very much possible as long as we trade within this range that we can see a move back towards 533, 530. And then, after that retest, we possibly see a pump back towards the upside. So that's what I'm looking at for the triple Qs when it comes to upside. Now, when it comes to downside, 529. You break below 529, 527 is your next target. But ultimately, guys, the main target you need to worry about is 515. All right, we're nowhere near there. So wouldn't really think about it too much or anything like that. But once you start getting near 515, that's where you start being concerned. Because we still have that gap that needs to be get filled all the way at 492. Okay, so when that happens, I don't know. Maybe after Nvidia earnings, maybe the next Fed meeting. But I definitely think this gap is going to get filled in the near future. It's right here. Sorry. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at for the triple Qs when we're talking about downside. And so we look at Nvidia. So Nvidia is in a weird spot here. I will say that much. So what happened here is that Nvidia broke below this rising wedge pattern, and it retested this rising wedge pattern, and it looks like it wants to break down all over again. Now, I did tell Discord members that if it breaks below 138, you're heading towards 135, which is nothing crazy to worry about, I will say. But as long as you stay within the 130s, I don't think there's anything to worry about when it comes to Nvidia. Now, what I will say is that once again, Nvidia just has a hard time holding 140. Okay, I said this in multiple videos. It just cannot hold 140. These psychopaths, these bears, these evolved Pokemon bears, whatever they are, these Charizards, whatever you want to call them, these guys are sitting on a beach right now, and they're just letting the algorithms do the work. Okay, they're just letting Nvidia. Every time Nvidia gets up here, these guys step in. Okay, every single time. I showed you guys on a monthly time frame. Every time you get above 140, bears step in, and I mean they step in aggressively. Right here, you have multiple bearish candles here. You have a bearish engulfing candle here. You have another bearish engulfing candle here that led to this gap down. And once again, we're trying to get above 140, but we continue to fail. Right, and I will say this as well, the measured move for this rising wedge is at around 100. Okay, you guys know that I have a price target of 100 when it comes to downside for Nvidia. Can it pump towards the upside? Yes, but I do think it's going to be short lived. Now, Nvidia has a history of pumping for its earnings, and then a few days to a few weeks after, it gives up all those gains for it after its earnings. So you definitely want to pay attention to that. So here's a good example. Nvidia, this earnings, well, actually, this earnings right here, you had Nvidia pump up, and then it gave it back, right? Here you had Nvidia drop, and then it went up, a few days, few weeks later. So anytime Nvidia does good or bad for its earnings, it tends to do the opposite a few days later. So you definitely want to pay attention to that. But again, I would be concerned here. I wouldn't be looking to buy calls here as long as these guys are present. Until we stop these guys out of their position, I would not be looking to buy calls on Nvidia. That's just me. You do what you want with that information. And so that's what I have for Nvidia. Apple. And Apple. So Apple is trading within this supply and demand zone. We've seen today, a Discord member kept pointing this out. He was basically saying Apple's having a hard time getting above 245. But my main concern is 247. And the reason why I say 247 is right where these bears are. These drooling at the mouth bears. They're waiting on any type of bad news to come in. Any type of bad news comes in, these guys right here. I mean, you zoom in and you see right here, right? Bearish candle, bearish candle, bearish candle. You barely got any bullish candles in this area. So bears are extremely present in this area. And I just don't have high hopes for Apple in the short term. Now, long term, I think Apple's going to do great. But short term, I just don't have high hopes. Can it go higher? Sure. But until it breaks above at least 247, I don't have much to talk about. 250 will be a very tough psych level for Apple to break. But 247 is right where these bears are. You definitely want to watch out for these guys. Again, I would not be looking to get calls here as long as we're within this range of these bears, because any type of bad news comes in, these guys are going to start drooling at the mouth, and they're going to hit those sell buttons so fast. All right, so you definitely want to be careful here when it comes to Apple. I think a low risk trade is puts here, and then you just set a stop loss of 247, and then you see what happens from there. But right now, definitely would not be interested in Apple here, whether it's to the upside or even to the downside. All right, I still want confirmation. We break back below the supply and demand zone. At around 240, we break below 240. I think Apple's cooked. You're going to start heading towards the downside. Now, it's important to note that you are making higher lows. You got a low here and a higher low here. We're just waiting for some type of confirmation of a higher high, and then you can start heading towards about 255, 252. But until then, wouldn't trust this thing at all. All right, that's what I have for Apple. Also, the projected move for this rising wedge, the short-term measured move was 220. The overall projected move for this is all the way at 206. I still have a price target to the downside of 206 on Apple, and I do think it's going to happen between this month and March. So we'll see. All right, we will see when it comes to Apple. A stock I want to talk about is ARM. So we did in the Discord we did 250, not 250, 150 puts on ARM. We did this last week, and we saw ARM drop all the way towards 153. I do have a price target of 147. It seems like a lot of stocks are just ignoring the spot, and this is my thing. A lot of stocks are just ignoring the spy, right? We're seeing the spy make new highs. I'm seeing people, brag, and they're like, "Oh, we made new highs in your face," and things like that. But it's just like when you look across the market, you got stocks like ARM dropping, you got Meta dropping, you got Palantir dropping, so it's just like who's really benefiting from these new highs? Unless you're a scalp trader, So, ARM, it broke towards the downside. I do think it's going to continue to head towards the downside. You're looking at this rising channel, not to be confused with a bear flag because it doesn't have a flagpole or anything like that. But yeah, I do think ARM is going to head towards the downside. You're going to be looking at a move towards 147, and then from there we'll have to see what happens. Now, how does this affect other semis? I can't say for sure, but it's kind of ironic that Nvidia is retesting this rising wedge pattern and kind of rejecting it here, and it's closing below 140 over and over. So something to be concerned about if you are bullish on semiconductors. There's something else I wanted to point out real quick. When you're looking at the ES, right, on a daily time frame, let's zoom in here. Is it the daily? No, maybe not the ES. Maybe it's the SPY. Okay, maybe it's gone. All right, but the ES was originally forming a shooting star pattern. Yeah, so on a 4 hour time frame, here it is. On a 4 hour time frame, you do have a shooting star pattern on the ES, so you definitely want to watch out for this. You could see a sell off towards the downside, all the way back towards the 6130s. It's very much possible that this is a double bottom as well, and it could form some type of triple bottom from here. So be careful here. In regards to the ES, obviously the market is closed, but maybe you just trade the futures or something like that. This is a shooting star pattern. Um, it's not confirmed yet until you break towards the downside, so we'll see. But other than that, that's what I want to point out when it comes to the ES. And so we look at Tesla. So Tesla actually looks good. Okay, it actually looks really good. So you have you a cup and handle pattern. You have your cup here, and you have a symmetrical triangle here, which will be your handle. Now, what I will say is that Tesla needs to break above 362. Is broke above it, and then it gave it all back, right? So you go down to the 2 hour time frame, and it gets a little sloppy here. So just bear with me. But you're seeing that bears are trying to push this down, but they're getting weaker. Okay, they're getting much weaker every attempt they're trying to push this down. So bulls are very much strong here. Worst case scenario for Tesla is that it just retests this supply and demand zone at around 357 and possibly, retest this symmetrical triangle or this handle, whatever you want to call it, and then break towards the upside. But yeah, as long as Tesla's can hold 360 and get above 362, you're looking at a move towards 375 on Tesla. Highs I'm looking at is about 400. And we go to the daily time frame on Tesla, and you're looking at this descending triangle, and there is a gap that needs to be filled at around 400. So institutions did get into 400 calls for next week on Tesla. So you definitely want to pay attention to that. Is it guaranteed to play out? No, but check that contract out and do your own due diligence. But yeah, Tesla looks okay here. I definitely think it's going to want to retest the bottom of this descending triangle, and then we'll see what happens from there. Another stock I want to talk about is AMD. So AMD has finally mounted this gap. And so what's important to note here is that AMD just could not mount a gap. I mean, it's been breaking down forever, right? You got your gap here, never could mount it. You got your gap here, retested the gap, never mounted it. Here, gap again, you gap down again, tried to retest the gap. Well, it did retest the gap, but it never mounted the gap. And so you finally mounted a gap on AMD. This is a good sign, okay? This is a very good sign. So as long as AMD can hold 114, you're looking at potential upside from here. Now, I can't say how that correlates with the market because the market is kind of, everything is kind of doing their own thing, and it seems like a lot of stocks are just reacting to their own personal news versus the market overall. So I would say that be careful. Set a tight stop loss if you're looking to trade AMD. I would just say about 114, 113, because again, I just can't. There's no correlation when it comes to the triple Qs and these other big names. So, 114. This is a very good sign that AMD has finally mounted a gap. What you really want to see when it comes to AMD is a break above this falling wedge, which is a bullish pattern, and you can be looking at a move towards 125. So again, every time AMD gapped down, it failed to mount this gap. It finally has done it today. Okay, it mounted 114, it mounted this gap fill. It's looking pretty good. What you want to see is a breakout towards the upside with this falling wedge. You possibly could form some type of inverse head and shoulders pattern here, so you might sit here for a few days or so. But overall, AMD looks good. It's not too far fetched to say that AMD has been doing the opposite of the market. I mean, you've seen the market pump and AMD drop. So if the market does decide to drop, it's very much possible that AMD pumps instead. So keep an eye on this. Do your own due diligence. AMD looks good as long as it stays above 114. And so we got to talk about Palantir. All right. I'm kind of above my time, but we're going to talk about Palantir real quick. So, congratulations to Discord members. We got into this trade yesterday on Palantir. So, I alerted this yesterday at 10:22 a.m. This was around when Palantir was at like 122. March 21 puts 110 strike at 4.10. So, congratulations to Discord members. We took profit on that today. Absolutely insane move. And so I've been preaching this in the Discord. I've said Palantir does not deserve to be this high. It just doesn't. Okay, I'm sorry. Not only that, but I have people arguing with me, not in the Discord, but just people arguing with me on social media saying, this is a breakaway gap. This is not a breakaway gap. This is an exhaustion gap. All right. There's a huge difference between the two. Exhaustion gaps have to get filled. Like it's almost mandatory for these to get filled. Breakaway gaps are gaps that you see on Nvidia. You know, Palantir does not deserve this type of valuation. It doesn't deserve to be this high. That's just me. I think this move right here was a bunch of FOMO. Not only FOMO, but I think Palantir was just pricing in its guidance for the rest of the year and not the next quarter. Right? We look at the Motley Fool. Right? Palantir raised its full year revenue outlook to a range of 2.677 billion to 2.689 billion, and I think this is what investors were pricing in. Right? And then you go down and you see for the second quarter, it guided for a revenue to come in between 649 million and 653 million, and adjusted income from operations of between 209 million and 213 million. Well, why are we guiding? We're guiding lower then, right? The estimate, or investors expected 775 million, and Palantir beat for 827 million. But now we're guiding for the second quarter with 649 million, between 649 million and 653 million. It doesn't deserve this valuation. All right, simple as that. If you want me to make a separate video on Palantir and how I came to the conclusion that it just does not deserve to be this high, I think it deserves to be in the 80s. I think that's reasonable. Then let me know in the comments below. But here you got this huge bearish engulfing candle. I think it's going to start heading towards this gap fill, not fill the gap fill, but head towards this gap at around 100. And then you're probably going to see a bounce from there. You're going to see some type of bounce. You're going to probably either retest 110, or you're going to retest 122, between 122 120, and then you start seeing that gap fill. So yeah, this exhaustion gap, this is not a breakaway gap. So yeah, for those who are arguing about it and things like that, this is not a breakaway gap. Um, there's a huge difference between the two. Okay, this was clearly FOMO. This is clearly them pricing in the rest of the year. They were not pricing in the next quarter. At least that's my belief. I don't think they were pricing in the next quarter. Not only that, but Palantir is not growing fast enough for this type of evaluation. It's just not. It's growing at 20%. That's not major. Okay, that's good. That's good. Sure, I'm not taking away from that, but it's not good enough for us to be pumping and pumping, pumping, and start seeing moves all the way to 200 or anything like that. Because I've seen traders say crazy targets like that. So yeah, definitely want to be careful here. You have a bearish engulfing candle once again. It looks like Palantir can head towards 100. Congratulations to Discord members. If you want access to those types of trades, Discord link was in the description below. I'm sure a lot of Discord members didn't take that trade because they were scared to trade against Palantir. But hey, you joined the Discord for a reason. You pay for the subscription for a reason, guys. So you gotta trust your boy. All right. But other than that, I do think Palantir is going to fill this gap. It's just a matter of when. So watch for um, a move towards this gap at around 100, a bounce from there, then you either going to retest 110, and you could possibly dollar cost average at around 120 if it decides to head higher than 110. You'll have your lower high here, and then you start creating that lower low. So I mean, clear move. Not only that, but quant data was showing that institutions were getting into those 110 puts as well. And I had to look it up and make sure. That's the main thing I look for when it comes to earnings. If the stock gaps up, does it deserve to gap up? Right? Does it deserve to hold that gap? And that determines whether it's a breakaway gap or an exhaustion gap. This is an exhaustion gap. It's going to get filled. Take my word for it. All right. Other than that, that's really all I have. VIX. I mean, you're constantly seeing the VIX trying to pump towards the upside. What's worrisome about the VIX right now is that it filled this gap, right? And I tell you guys all the time, gaps have very strong support and resistance, right? So yeah, you definitely want to be careful here. You do have a bearish engulfing candle on the VIX. Now, I don't pay attention to if the VIX pays attention, not pay attention, but if the VIX respects candle patterns. So you guys let me know in the comments below. I think it respects actual patterns like, rising wedges and things like that, but I don't think it really respects candle patterns. So take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, you're constantly seeing the VIX trying to gain life here. It's trying to spike towards the upside. So you definitely want to be careful here. But overall, that's pretty much all I have. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. This market is really, really annoying. Again, you're just seeing the SPY make these new highs. You're seeing the triple Qs make these new highs, but you're just not seeing it across the board. You're not seeing it with the Max 7, Microsoft, Tesla. You got some life today. Apple is still trading within this range. Nvidia. You're just not seeing it across the board, and that's what I would like to see. So again, I think once the Nasdaq and ES, because despite you seeing the SPY make new highs and the Qs make new highs, you're just not seeing it with NQ and ES, right? I mean, clear as day, right? You still haven't made new highs on NQ, and I think once that happens, guys, once we break above this area right here, that's when Mag 7 is going to go crazy. All right. Or at least the overall market is going to go crazy. So you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Also important to note that those SPY 579 puts are still in play until Friday. Okay. So I don't know. Okay, I know a lot of you believe that the SPY making a 20-point move is impossible in one day. It's done it plenty of times before, so I don't know what we're talking about here. Okay, I have people arguing or troll in the comments, the other people in the comments, acting like a 20-point move for the SPY in one day is impossible. Like, what are we talking about here? It's happened before, So a move all the way to 580, very much possible in the SPY. That would obviously be a flash crash. So we'll see. Until the next video, traders, Discord link is in the description below. You have you a good one.